I was halfway through a quarterly meeting in Boston when my phone buzzed on the table next to my notebook. I glanced down. Derek. Mobile. We hadn't spoken since I left 2 days ago. I expected something routine. Maybe a question about the dog. Maybe just a quick, "How's it going?" I stepped out into the hallway and answered. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice warm. "Everything okay?" There was a pause. Then Derek's voice came through the line. Flat, cold, too calm. "I think it's time we stop pretending," he said. "I'm filing for divorce." I stopped walking. "What?" "I've already moved out," he continued, "and sold the house." My mouth went dry. "You did what?" "We both know it was coming, Rachel. We've been distant for a long time. Courtney and I found a place near the lake. She's helping me start fresh. You'll figure something out." Courtney. The name hung in the air like the sound of glass breaking. I had suspected something. The long workouts, the vague explanations, the way he always seemed just out of reach. But to hear her name spoken like that, so casually, cut deeper than I expected. I leaned against the wall, willing my voice to stay steady. "You sold the house," I repeated. "Yep," he said, almost amused. "You can check the email, everything's done." I could hear traffic in the background. Maybe he was already out celebrating. Maybe she was in the car with him. "I have to get back to my meeting," I said quietly. I didn't wait for his reply. I walked back into the conference room with a frozen smile and sat through the next 2 hours like I was underwater. People talked, slides clicked. None of it registered. In that moment, everything I thought I understood about my life, my marriage, my home, my husband, shifted into something I didn't recognize. But I also felt something else, rising through the fog. A kind of quiet clarity. Because what Derek didn't know, what he had never once thought to ask, was that the house wasn't his to sell. Not anymore. We bought the house on Maple Street 6 years ago, just after Derek turned 35. He said it felt like a fresh start. He liked the brick porch, the big bay window, the little garden patch in the front. I loved the open kitchen, the oak floors, and the sun that came through the living room in the morning like it had nowhere else to be. It wasn't a dream house, but it felt like a life house. We'd only been married 2 years at the time. He had just left his job as a fitness instructor to try his hand at a health supplement business. I had just been promoted to director of finance at Carter & Bell, a company I'd worked at since I was 25. We didn't have equal income. But we told ourselves we were equal in effort, in dreams, in commitment. So I didn't mind that I covered the down payment, or that the mortgage payments came from my account, or that when we refinanced the house last year to take advantage of a better rate, Derek told me. "Just put it in your name, it'll make the process easier." He said it without thinking, flipping through the paperwork as he scrolled on his phone. I remember looking at him over the rim of my coffee cup and thinking, he really has no idea what he's signing. Not that I planned it that way. At the time, it just made sense. The loan officer had even said it was more efficient since my credit score was higher and my income more stable. So I did it. I signed, he signed, and the house became mine, legally, solely, and without his memory of the detail. But I didn't tell anyone. Not even my sister. It felt impolite, like drawing lines where they weren't needed. It wasn't until now, standing in a hotel room hundreds of miles away, that I realized the weight of that decision. He thought he had blindsided me. He thought he was smart, fast, ahead of me. But Derek had never really paid attention to the fine print. He was the kind of man who liked sweeping gestures, sudden plans, big ideas, the kind that sound inspiring until the bills come in. In the first few years I admired that about him. I liked that he talked about potential, that he believed in momentum, that he still wrote notes on paper and quoted motivational speakers like they were prophets. But slowly that optimism became recklessness. He quit the supplement business after a year, said the market was oversaturated. He moved on to real estate photography, then crypto coaching, then personal branding consulting. Each new venture came with promises. "This is the one," he'd say. "It's gonna take off." And each time I smiled and nodded, covering the bills and telling myself this was just a phase. Until it wasn't. Until I started realizing that every month I was carrying more of the weight, emotionally and financially, that the mortgage, the groceries, the repairs, the vacation plans, everything, landed in my lap while he pitched new ideas and bought ring lights and wrote clients in a planner I never saw him open. And when I asked questions, he turned them into jokes. "You worry too much," he'd say, kissing the top of my head. "We're building something here." Looking back, we weren't building anything. I was building and he was standing on it. And when it started to crack, he didn't try to repair it. He walked off and told someone else they could have the view. But the thing about walking away from a house, You can't take it with you. Back in my hotel room, I sat on the edge of the bed with my laptop open, the TV muted, and my mind racing. I pulled up the scanned files from last year's refinance. It took less than a minute to confirm what I already suspected. The deed was in my name. Only mine. No joint ownership, no cosign, no loopholes. I remembered the day we signed. The bank agent had walked us through the documents. Derek had nodded at all the right moments, but barely looked up from his phone. I'd asked a few questions about transfer logistics and ownership. He had shrugged and said, "Whatever gets it done faster," and so we had. Now that lack of interest, that carelessness, was going to cost him more than he could imagine. I clicked through my inbox to find the digital copy of the warranty deed and saved it to a separate folder. Then I sent a message to my attorney. Subject: urgent. Possible fraud concern. Chloe Barnes had been my lawyer since I bought my first condo in my 20s. She was efficient, brilliant, and never sugarcoated a single thing. I didn't have to wait long. Less than an hour later, my phone rang. "Rachel," she said, no hello. "Tell me everything." I walked her through the phone call, the smug tone, the mention of Courtney, the fact that he claimed he had already sold the house. She let out a slow exhale when I finished. "First of all," she said, "he cannot sell what he does not legally own." "I figured," I said. "Second," she continued, "if he accepted any form of payment or signed any agreement with a buyer, he may be in serious trouble. That's attempted fraud, possibly even wire fraud depending on how the transaction was conducted." I paused. "What do we do?" "I'll start by checking with the county records office to see if any attempted sale has been filed. If not, we'll contact the real estate agent, if he used one, and inform them of the invalidity. If he's already received funds, the buyer may pursue him directly. Either way, you are fully protected." I felt my shoulders begin to relax for the first time all day. "There's something poetic about this," I admitted. "He thought he was playing chess. Turns out he never even knew what the board looked like." Chloe chuckled. "Men like that always assume they're 10 steps ahead. It's amazing how many of them don't read the contracts they sign." "Ironic considering how confident he was on the phone," I said. "It's like he expected me to collapse." Chloe's voice sharpened. "Let him underestimate you. Just keep every document, every text, every email. We'll handle the rest." We hung up with a plan in place. I leaned back against the headboard and stared at the ceiling. This wasn't the life I had imagined. Divorce wasn't a chapter I'd planned to write. But as I sat there, I realized I wasn't afraid. I wasn't broken. I wasn't lost. I was ready. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity, a clean slate, and maybe, just maybe, the chance to rebuild something better than before. And I knew one thing for sure. Derek had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Not by leaving me, not by calling it quits, but by thinking I would be the one left with nothing. By the next morning, Chloe had already pulled county records. As we suspected, there had been an attempted sale, a pending transaction filed 2 days earlier under a standard purchase agreement. The buyer? A local couple who thought they were getting a great deal on a motivated seller's home in Oak Park. Except the seller didn't have legal ownership. That made the entire transaction null and void. And if Derek had accepted any deposit, that tipped the situation into criminal territory. "Do we know how much money exchanged hands?" I asked. "Not yet," Chloe replied, "but I've sent a formal notification to the real estate agent handling the deal. We'll also send a cease and desist directly to Derek. If he's accepted a deposit, we'll demand immediate return. If not, we shut it down before it gets worse." "Do we notify the buyers?" "I'll let the agent handle that. It's better coming from someone they already trust. We'll stay in the background, for now." By mid-afternoon, the cease and desist was in Derek's inbox, along with an attached PDF of the deed with my name alone at the bottom. Chloe included a summary of the legal consequences for continuing the fraud attempt. She didn't mince words. "If you proceed, you open yourself to legal action, including charges of fraudulent misrepresentation and attempted conversion of property." Later that day, I received a call from the buyer's agent, a woman named Sandra with a tight voice and clipped tone. "I spoke to Mr. Monroe last week," she said. "He was confident everything was in order." "He was mistaken," I replied. "Legally he has no claim to the property." "Well, the Thompsons, our buyers, are furious. They've already submitted a 10% earnest deposit. If that money isn't returned within 48 hours, they're threatening legal action." I took a breath. "Understood. And just so you know, I had no part in this arrangement. I was out of state. I'm correcting it now." There was a long pause. "Thank you for being direct," she said. Chloe followed up by drafting a second letter, this one to Derek's email, his last known address, and his registered P.O. box. It was firm, professional, and left zero room for misinterpretation. By then, Tyler had gone silent. No calls, no emails, no half-hearted excuses, which of course meant he was stewing, calculating, preparing some kind of defense. Men like Derek rarely disappear. They retreat, wait for the storm to pass, and then try to return with a different narrative. But this time, he wouldn't get the chance. I flew home the following evening, arriving just after dark. The house was still as I pulled into the driveway. His car wasn't there. The porch light was off. When I stepped inside, everything was exactly where I left it. His shoes were still by the front door. His hoodie hung over the banister. A half-empty protein shake sat on the counter, long since spoiled. It looked like a man had vanished mid-scene. But I knew better. He had run away thinking he had the upper hand, but he had built his scheme on sand, and now it was washing away faster than he could grab it. As I stood in the middle of the living room, I felt a strange mix of grief and relief. The life we had shared was dissolving rapidly, but instead of falling apart, I felt myself coming back together. This wasn't revenge. It was correction. A realignment of power, long overdue. I unpacked, fed the dog, and poured a glass of wine. I texted Chloe. "All quiet here, no sign of him yet." She replied, "Let's hope he stays quiet, but just in case, keep everything documented." Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table with the deed, the legal letters, and my divorce paperwork. All of it in neat little piles. Derek might have thought this was over, but I was just getting started. He came back 2 days later. I was sitting in the living room, laptop on my knees, a candle flickering on the windowsill. The dog stirred first, ears twitching, nose in the air. Just before I heard the keys fumbling in the front door, the lock clicked. The door swung open. Derek walked in like he still lived there, like nothing had changed, like he hadn't left a voicemail ending our marriage and declaring the house sold without so much as a conversation. He paused when he saw me. "You're home," he said, almost surprised. "I live here," I replied. He shut the door with more force than necessary and dropped his gym bag by the stairs. "I got your lawyer's letter," he said. "What is this, some kind of joke?" I closed my laptop slowly. "No, Derek, this is a correction." His eyes narrowed. "You're saying I can't sell the house?" "I'm not saying it. The county records are. The bank is. The buyer's agent is. You don't own the house. You haven't for almost a year." He took a step forward, voice rising. "We bought this place together, Rachel. It's our house." "It was our house. Now it's mine." I stood up, walked to the kitchen counter and pulled out a folder. Inside was a copy of the deed, clearly stating sole ownership in my name, dated and notarized. I laid it gently on the coffee table in front of him. He stared at it, blinking. "You tricked me," he muttered. "No," I said calmly. "You ignored the paperwork you signed. You didn't ask questions. You didn't care. And now you're facing the consequences of that arrogance." He picked up the document, flipped through it, then slammed it back down. "This doesn't mean anything. We're married. That house is half mine." I shook my head. "You might want to check Illinois property law. Ownership trumps assumptions." He began pacing, his voice turning from defiant to desperate. "You don't get it! Courtney and I already put a deposit on the new place. I used the earnest money. I figured everything would move fast and— You used money that wasn't yours." He froze. "You committed fraud, Derek. You entered into a transaction you had no right to make, accepted a deposit under false pretenses, and nearly cost 2 people their savings and their future." He didn't respond, just stared at the floor, breathing heavily. "You're lucky the Thompsons decided not to press charges," I continued. "But if you try anything else, I won't be as generous." He looked up sharply. "You think you can just erase me?" "No," I said. "You did that yourself when you walked out, when you gave up on this marriage and tried to take everything with you." "I made a mistake," he said, suddenly shifting tactics. "People make mistakes. People forget anniversaries, they burn dinner, they don't steal homes and lie about it." He slumped onto the edge of the couch, face in his hands. "I didn't think you'd fight back," he said quietly. "You always let things go." I studied him. This man I had once believed in. This man I had defended, supported, built a life with. Maybe he thought I'd still be that woman. Maybe he didn't realize she no longer lived here. I walked to the front door, opened it, and looked back at him. "You can take your things tonight," I said. "Whatever you leave behind will be boxed up and donated. I'm giving you the dignity of a quiet exit. Please don't mistake that for weakness." He didn't move at first, but when he did, it was slow. He gathered clothes, chargers, shoes, stuffed them into a duffel bag without speaking. The whole time I sat at the kitchen table watching the candle burn lower. As he stepped out onto the porch, he turned back one last time. "You really don't want to talk about this?" "I already did," I said softly. "You just weren't listening." Then I closed the door behind him and locked it. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when the knock came. I was in the middle of folding laundry, music playing softly in the background, when I heard it. 3 crisp raps at the front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it slowly, cautiously. Standing there was Courtney. She was shorter than I imagined, dressed in athleisure, hair swept into a sleek ponytail, holding a small duffel bag in one hand, and a confused, somewhat expectant look in her eyes. "Hi," she said, her voice almost too casual. "Is Derek here?" I stared at her for a long moment, then opened the door wider. "No, he's not." She stepped inside without being asked, scanning the space like someone seeing a hotel lobby they'd only seen in pictures. "So, this is the place," she said with a smile. "Derek told me it was beautiful, but I didn't expect it to feel so cozy." I folded my arms. "Why are you here, Courtney?" She turned, surprised by the tone. "I thought we'd start moving some of Derek's stuff today. He said we could stay here temporarily, just until the closing on the new condo." My jaw tightened. "Let me be clear, you're not staying here." Her face fell. "Excuse me?" "This is my home," I said, calmly but firmly. "Derek doesn't live here anymore, and he certainly doesn't have the right to invite anyone to stay." Her eyes narrowed slightly, defensive. "Look, I don't want to be in the middle of anything, but Derek said he owned this place, that it was sold and everything was handled." I walked to the kitchen counter and pulled out the folder. Again, the deed, the emails, the timeline. "Read for yourself," I said, placing it on the coffee table. She hesitated, then walked over, flipping through the pages. Her brows furrowed as she read. Her lips parted slightly, then her face drained of color. "Wait. This is just your name?" "Yes." "You refinanced, and he signed it over?" I nodded. "But he told me—" She stopped, voice breaking. "He said it was his house, that you didn't want it, that you'd already moved out." I shook my head. "He lied." She dropped into the armchair as if her legs gave out beneath her. "Was anything he said true?" she whispered. "I doubt it," I replied. "He also told the buyers he had legal right to sell the property. That lie nearly landed him in court." She looked up at me slowly, shame creeping into her expression. "I didn't know. I swear." "I believe you," I said. "This isn't about you, Courtney, not entirely." She was silent for a long moment, then, "I thought he was honest, a little intense maybe, but he always talked like you were the problem. Cold, controlling." I smiled faintly. "That's what people like Derek do. They rewrite the story, especially when the truth doesn't make them look good." She stood abruptly. "I need to go." I followed her to the door. As she stepped out onto the porch, she paused. "Just one more thing. Do you know if he actually put down money on that condo? With our joint deposit?" My stomach twisted. "I don't know," I said, "but if he did, you should check who's legally responsible, and you should protect yourself." She nodded, slowly, like her world was coming apart in slow motion. Then she turned and walked away. When the door closed, I let out a long breath, not in anger, not in triumph, just release. Because now the truth was out, not just to the courts, not just to the buyers, but to the woman he thought would replace me, and the silence that followed wasn't empty, it was justice. The next time Derek showed up, it wasn't with arrogance or denial, it was with defeat. He knocked instead of using his key, which meant he'd finally figured out that I'd changed the locks. When I opened the door, he stood there with dark circles under his eyes and a single envelope in his hand. No gym bag, no swagger, no smile. "I need to talk," he said. I nodded, stepping aside. 5 minutes. He walked in like he didn't recognize the place anymore. I had changed things, removed every trace of him, new throw pillows, new rug. I had painted the hallway a lighter color just 2 days ago. Everything felt brighter, cleaner. He noticed. "You really cleared me out, huh?" he said quietly. "No. You did that yourself." He sat down without asking. I didn't offer coffee, or water, or comfort. "I talked to Courtney," he began. "I know." She left. "I know that too." He looked at me then, really looked at me, like he hadn't in months, maybe years. "You told her the truth?" "No," I said, voice calm. "You lied to her, I just didn't protect your version." He ran a hand over his face. "I messed up." "I know." He hesitated, then held out the envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Signed divorce papers." I didn't touch it. "I thought you'd fight me," he said. "You thought wrong." We sat in silence for a long time. Then he finally spoke the words he had avoided for weeks. "I didn't think you'd ever stand up to me." "That's the problem," I said. You stopped seeing me as someone with power. He nodded slowly, the realization settling in. I used to love you so much, I added. But over time I started loving the person I had to be just to survive you even more. He blinked, but said nothing. I walked to the kitchen, pulled a manila folder from the drawer, and placed it in front of him. Here's everything from Chloe. The division of assets. The confirmation of sole property. You'll find there's nothing left to fight for. He flipped through the pages like he already knew what was inside. I don't have anything left, he whispered. That's not my doing, I said. That's the cost of every lie you told, and every shortcut you took. He reached for the signed papers again. I'll give these to Chloe myself. It's the least I can do. No, Derek, I said gently but firmly. The least you can do is leave peacefully and stop pretending this happened to you. He stood slowly. I'm sorry, he said. For everything. I nodded. I know, but that doesn't change anything. He walked to the door and paused with his hand on the handle. You really don't hate me? No, I said, I don't hate you, I outgrew you. He didn't look back, and I didn't ask him to. When the door shut behind him, it didn't feel dramatic. It didn't feel like the end of something beautiful. It felt like finally closing the cover on a book that had too many blank pages. The first thing I did after Derek left for good was open every window in the house. It was a chilly morning, but I didn't care. I wanted the air to shift, the walls to breathe, and every ounce of stale energy to blow out into the street. The curtains fluttered like flags in surrender. Then I started clearing. His books. Gone. The ugly glass sculpture he insisted on keeping in the hallway. Donated. His favorite chair that never matched anything in the house. Curbside by noon. I boxed everything without anger. I folded his shirts carefully. I didn't smash anything or burn any photos. I wasn't trying to erase him, I was making space for myself. By the afternoon, the house felt different. Not empty, just honest. My friend Jenna came over later with 2 coffees and a toolbox. You said you wanted to take the shelves down in the bedroom, she said, grinning. They were his idea, I replied. I never liked them. We spent the rest of the afternoon drilling, patching, repainting, and laughing. She told me about a trip she was planning to New Mexico. I told her I might finally take that interior design course I'd been talking about for years. You should, she said. You've always had the eye for it, I smiled. Maybe now I finally have the space. That night, for the first time in a long time, I slept with the bedroom door open. No tossed jacket on the chair, no snoring, no tension in the sheets, just quiet, deep and complete. Over the next few days I reclaimed little things. I brought my grandmother's quilt out of storage and draped it over the living room couch. I found my old vinyl records, played them one by one while I cleaned the kitchen. I moved the dining table closer to the window so the morning light would hit my seat directly. I changed the passwords to every account. I updated my name on the title, now with a small footnote marking the finalized divorce. I kept the framed wedding photo, but I moved it into a storage box in the attic, not out of spite but because I no longer needed it within reach. I wasn't trying to forget the past. I was simply no longer decorating my life with it. Chloe called midweek with an update. Everything's finalized, she said. Derek signed, no objections. Good, I said. Thank you for all of it. You did most of the work, she replied. I just made it legal. I stood at the window after we hung up, sipping tea. The sky was soft with spring clouds. A neighbor's kid biked past, a pink streamer trailing behind her. The smell of soil drifted in from the garden. Peace doesn't always come loudly. Sometimes it just arrives like this. Quiet. Real. Unmistakable. That evening I wrote a list titled, Things I Want That Are Only For Me. At the top, paint the bedroom navy, buy a new reading chair, travel alone somewhere coastal, say yes slower, say no faster. I pinned the list on the fridge like a child's drawing, not because it was perfect, but because it mattered. This wasn't just about redecorating a house, it was about reintroducing myself to the woman who lived here. A month later the house felt entirely mine. Not because of a document or a title, though I had both, but because of the way I moved through it. Light on my feet, no tension in my shoulders, no wondering if my silence would be misread, or if my joy would be too much. One Saturday morning I woke up with sunlight pouring through the windows, brewed a fresh pot of coffee and walked barefoot to the porch. I hadn't slept in that late in years. There was no one to ask where I'd been. No one waiting to explain why money was missing, no one calling me dramatic for caring about the details, just me. And that was enough. I started spending more time in my garden. I bought flowers I couldn't name and planted herbs in mismatched ceramic pots. I wore gloves that didn't match and listened to classical music through an old speaker Derek once said was too tinny. The neighbors noticed the change. "You seem lighter," said Mrs. Kaplan from next door as she leaned over the fence. "I am," I replied with a smile that surprised even me. When the divorce was officially filed with the court, I marked the date by doing something small but symbolic. I bought a new mailbox. Black matte finish, clean lines. I screwed it in myself, standing on the brick stoop in a tank top and jeans, smiling like a woman who had finally read the fine print on her own life. Jenna and I celebrated with Thai food and a bottle of cold Prosecco in the backyard. We toasted to new beginnings, to inner peace, to no longer explaining ourselves. "To freedom," she said. "To remembering what I want," I replied. That night, I lit a candle in every room, not for any spiritual reason, just to let the house glow, soft, golden, warm. I sat at the kitchen table with a notepad and wrote, "This was never about keeping a house, it was about reclaiming a home, and the home, it turns out, was me." The next morning I received a text from Derek. "I'm sorry for everything, I hope you're okay." I stared at it for a long while, then I deleted it without responding. Not out of cruelty, not to prove a point, just because I no longer needed an ending from him. The closure came from knowing that the worst thing he ever did to me, trying to strip me of my home, my dignity, my peace, had backfired not because I fought dirty but because I was prepared, calm, and absolutely unwilling to be erased. He had called me smug and certain, thinking I would crumble. He had no idea I was already rebuilding. Now when I walk past the mirror, I don't see someone abandoned or betrayed, I see someone free, and that, in the end, is the only thing he couldn't take from me.